6. Discoveries found beneath Tasmania that don't fit into history. Beneath the dense rainforests and jagged coastlines of Tasmania, something is quietly waiting to be explained. Not simple fossils. Not the kind of ruins that fit neatly onto a museum placard. What has been emerging from the earth, the caves, and the drowned seabeds surrounding this island is far stranger than that. 6 discoveries, each pulled from beneath the surface of one of the most remote places on the planet, are challenging the accepted timeline of human presence in the southern hemisphere. Scientists have argued over them. Archaeologists have buried findings that contradicted each other. And the deeper the excavations continue, the more uncomfortable the questions become. Tasmania is not just another island. For more than 10,000 years, the Bass Strait has separated it from mainland Australia, sealing it off after the last ice age caused sea levels to rise dramatically and swallow the land bridge that once connected them. Before that flooding, Tasmania was not an island at all. It was the southern tip of a much larger continent, and people walked across it freely. What they left behind in that ancient landscape, before the ocean erased every road they knew, is only now beginning to surface. Today, we are going deep into 6 discoveries found beneath Tasmania that do not align with the version of history taught in classrooms. No manufactured mystery, just the evidence, the scientists who uncovered it, and the debates that remain stubbornly unresolved. In 1981, deep inside the Franklin River Valley, in the remote southwest wilderness of Tasmania, archaeologists pushed through dense button grass and ancient myrtle forest and entered a cave that had not seen a human visitor in more than 15,000 years. The cave was called Kutikina. Inside its limestone chambers, beneath layers of compacted ochre-stained sediment, they found the remains of one of the most significant Ice Age occupation sites ever discovered in the entire southern hemisphere. What made Kutikina remarkable was not simply the presence of ancient tools. It was the density, the precision, and the sheer volume of stone artifacts found there. Researchers uncovered more than 75,000 individual pieces of worked stone, along with the bones of extinct megafauna, including the Tasmanian cave bear and the giant short-faced kangaroo. Charcoal samples, drawn from ancient fireplaces, embedded deep in the cave floor, dated the occupation to between 30,000 and 20,000 years ago, placing human presence in southwestern Tasmania during the peak of the last ice age, when most of the surrounding continent would have been essentially uninhabitable. The problem is what this implies. At the time these people were sheltering inside Kutikina Cave, outside temperatures were approximately 5 to 8 degrees Celsius colder than today. The landscape stretching beyond the cave entrance was not the dense rainforest that exists there now. It was an open, windswept periglacial plain, a frozen, treeless environment more comparable to the Siberian steppe than to anything surviving in modern Tasmania. These were not primitive wanderers stumbling into a dry hollow for a single night. They were systematic hunters who returned to this specific location over thousands of years, who managed fire with enough skill to survive sub-zero conditions, and who processed animal bone and stone with a level of consistency and technical discipline that implies organized, purposeful activity over an extraordinary span of time. The stone tools themselves deepened the confusion. Many of the scrapers and points recovered from Kutikina matched techniques previously associated only with cultures from considerably further north, or from time periods much later in the archaeological record. When researchers traced the origin of the fine-grained silicrete used in these tools, it had been transported from outcrops more than 100 kilometers from the cave. That is not the behavior of a population operating at the lowest rung of cognitive capacity. That is planning. That is territorial knowledge. That is a system of movement or exchange across a landscape the accepted model of Ice Age Tasmanian life never accounted for. Kutikina Cave was supposed to be a straightforward confirmation of ancient Aboriginal habitation during the Ice Age. Instead, it opened questions that researchers have struggled to close ever since. The second discovery is not found inside a cave. It lies beneath the ocean. When sea levels began rising at the end of the last Ice Age, roughly 12,000 years ago, the land bridge connecting Tasmania to mainland Australia did not simply vanish overnight. It drowned slowly, over centuries, as meltwater from the retreating polar ice caps pushed ocean levels higher and higher across the broad, shallow platform of the continental shelf. What that process erased was not just geography. It erased an entire inhabited landscape, a vast coastal plain that had been home to people, animals, river systems, and food resources for tens of thousands of years, was consumed by the rising Bass Strait, and the world that existed there was sealed beneath 40 meters of cold Southern Ocean. Modern sonar surveys and submarine investigations of the Bass Strait floor have revealed something that directly challenges what we assumed we understood about the scale of ancient human presence in this part of the world. The seabed between Tasmania and Victoria is not featureless sand. It contains the remnants of ancient river channels, dried lake beds, submerged coastal dune systems, and what appear to be the structural traces of human habitation sites, including stone arrangements, shell middens, and the remnants of hearth features preserved beneath layers of marine sediment undisturbed for thousands of years. One survey, conducted by researchers affiliated with the University of Queensland, identified submerged landscape features consistent with freshwater springs and associated human campsites at depths of up to 40 meters below the current sea surface. Thermoluminescence, dating of sediment samples from the surrounding area, placed the burial of these features at approximately 8,000 years ago, meaning this particular stretch of land was above water and actively occupied by human populations less than 10,000 years before the present. The implications are difficult to overstate. If the current data is accurate, the Bass Strait Shelf contains the submerged remnants of one of the largest prehistoric cultural landscapes in the entire southern hemisphere. A landscape that was never systematically investigated before the ocean swallowed it, and is only now being mapped from above the surface by instruments capable of reading through water and sediment. Indigenous oral traditions from both Tasmania and southern Victoria have long described memories of a time when the land stretched further, when people walked between places now separated by open water. Academic researchers spent decades classifying these accounts as mythology rather than cultural memory. The sonar data accumulating on the Bass Strait floor is making that dismissal increasingly difficult to sustain. The third discovery takes us right back underground. Not far from Kutikina, deeper into the limestone cave country of the Arthur Range in the southwest corner of Tasmania, a second major site came to light during systematic archaeological surveys conducted in the late 1980s. Warreen Cave contained a bone assemblage unlike anything previously documented in the region. Packed into a chamber roughly 12 meters square, researchers found the skeletal remains of dozens of individual animals layered across a floor that had been deliberately and repeatedly managed over an extraordinary period of time. The deposits showed unmistakable evidence of systematic use. Animal bones cracked consistently for marrow extraction, specific anatomical elements selected and retained, others discarded in patterns that were too consistent to be accidental. The radiocarbon dates that came back from Warreen Cave were extraordinary. Charcoal samples taken from the deepest confirmed occupation layers returned dates of approximately 33,000 years before the present, placing Warreen among the oldest confirmed human occupation sites anywhere in Australia. But the dating was not the most unsettling aspect of what the excavation produced. What researchers struggled to explain was the selection behaviour made visible in the bone assemblage itself. Certain species appeared in the deposit in proportions that bore no relationship to their natural abundance in the surrounding environment. Wallaby jaw bones were present in far greater quantities than wallaby limb bones. Wombat femurs appeared with cut marks consistent with deliberate butchering, while wombat skulls were almost entirely absent from the deposit. This is not the pattern of random accumulation. This is a system. And a system implies decision-making. It implies a processing protocol. It implies the kind of structured cognitive behaviour that formal archaeology has consistently attributed only to populations living many thousands of years later in the accepted developmental timeline. One interpretation that has been raised and vigorously contested is that Warreen Cave may represent not simply a temporary shelter, but a dedicated carcass processing station, a site to which hunters returned specifically to butcher and prepare animals, separating high-calorie marrow bones from lower-value material before transporting the most nutritious portions to a primary residential camp elsewhere. If that interpretation is correct, the people using Warreen Cave 33,000 years ago were operating with a degree of economic planning, a degree of logistical organisation across a territorial system that demands a significant rethinking of Ice Age cognitive capacity in the Southern Hemisphere. The cave sits in one of the most difficult wilderness environments in Tasmania, Accessing it today requires specialized preparation. The people who used it 30,000 years ago did so through ice and wind and darkness, returning season after season. That fact alone is worth sitting with. The fourth discovery is perhaps the quietest of the six, and also the most unsettling. The Derwent River Valley runs through the heart of Tasmania, from the Central Plateau down to the city of Hobart, cutting through a landscape layered with deep agricultural history and colonial infrastructure. For most of its modern story, the valley has been associated with hydroelectric dams, hop farms, and the slow business of settlement. Beneath that contemporary surface, however, a series of finds made during construction work and drainage excavations across several decades has produced a quiet but persistent controversy in Australian archaeological circles. A controversy that has received far less attention than it deserves. The artifacts in question are not visually dramatic. They are stone objects, mostly small, mostly unremarkable in appearance to anyone without training in lithic analysis. But several examples recovered from deep alluvial deposits across different points in the Derwent Valley present a genuine problem. Some show evidence of a manufacturing method called pressure flaking, a sophisticated technique for working stone that involves applying precise, controlled force through a pointed tool to remove thin, standardized flakes from a stone core. Pressure flaking produces tools with sharper, more consistent edges than percussion flaking allows, and it requires a different and more nuanced understanding of stone mechanics to execute successfully. In established archaeological frameworks, pressure flaking appears at specific and well-documented points in the record, associated with known cultural traditions in Europe, the Americas, and parts of Asia. In Tasmania, it was long considered to be extremely rare, or effectively absent from the pre-contact archaeological record. The discovery of pressure-flaked specimens in deep Derwent Valley deposits therefore attracted immediate and skeptical scrutiny. When samples of these artifacts were submitted for optically stimulated luminescence dating of the surrounding sediment layers in the 1990s, the results placed the deposit formation at between 40,000 and 50,000 years before the present. At that depth, in sediment of that confirmed age, finding pressure-flaked stone in Tasmania contradicts the established developmental model directly. The technique was not supposed to exist anywhere in this region during that period. The response from the broader archaeological community was measured and cautious. Researchers raised the possibility of sediment layer contamination from above. Others proposed that the objects had been displaced downward through natural pedogenic processes, settling into older deposits from younger layers. A thorough formal excavation of the primary deposit site was never completed. The artifacts are held in storage. The questions they raise have not been formally answered, and the site from which they came has never received the systematic investigation it clearly warrants. The fifth discovery is not a physical object at all. In 2011, a significant genetic study examining the ancestral DNA preserved in biological material from Aboriginal Tasmanian populations produced a result that the lead researchers themselves described as deeply unexpected. Analysis of mitochondrial DNA extracted from hair samples collected during the early colonial period, samples held in museum and institutional collections across Britain and Australia, revealed a sequence of genetic markers pointing toward a population divergence from mainland Aboriginal Australians that occurred far earlier than the existing model of Tasmanian prehistory allowed for. The standard accepted interpretation held that the ancestors of the Tasmanian Aboriginal people crossed to the island via the Bass Strait land bridge sometime between 35,000 and 40,000 years ago, and that after the flooding of that bridge, approximately 10,000 years ago, the Tasmanian population remained in effective genetic isolation from the mainland. The genetic study confirmed the isolation. What it could not confirm was the established crossing date. The rate of mutational change accumulated in the sampled mitochondrial sequences suggested the Tasmanian population had been diverging genetically from mainland Aboriginal Australians for a period closer to 70,000 years than 40,000. If that figure is accurate, it pushes the initial arrival of anatomically modern humans into the greater Tasmanian region, back to a point that sits uncomfortably outside the boundaries of the most widely accepted models of human dispersal out of Africa and across Southeast Asia into the Southern Pacific. The paper was published in a peer-reviewed journal, challenged by several researchers, partially defended by its authors, and then gradually absorbed into the background of a conversation that did not seem eager to pursue its implications further. The lead researchers were explicit and appropriately cautious in their conclusions, flagging the complications introduced by the small sample size and by the known challenges of working with ancient DNA that has degraded over tens of thousands of years in museum storage conditions. But the number remained: 70,000 years. A figure that, if confirmed through broader sampling and improved ancient DNA methodology, would require a fundamental revision of the human migration timeline in the Southern Hemisphere, and would place the story of the people of Tasmania at the very leading edge of the human journey across the planet. No comprehensive follow-up genetic study using modern extraction techniques has been conducted since that 2011 publication. The sixth and final discovery is the most recent and the least explained. King Island sits in the western approach to Bass Strait, exposed without protection to the full force of the Southern Ocean rolling in from the Antarctic. It is small, flat, and predominantly agricultural. It does not appear in any mainstream discussion of ancient mysteries or contested prehistory. But in 2019, a team of marine geologists conducting what was described as a routine benthic habitat survey off the southwestern coast of King Island recorded something on their side-scan sonar imagery that brought the survey to an unplanned halt. The sonar data showed a series of linear features on the seabed at a depth of approximately 22 meters. The lines were too regular to be the product of geological folding or fracturing. They were too consistent in their spacing and in their directional orientation to be explained by tidal current activity or the normal patterns of sediment transport across a shallow seafloor. The linear features extended across an area of roughly 400 square meters and were arranged in what the survey team described as an apparently deliberate geometric configuration. At multiple intersection points between the lines, the sonar return signal was consistent with the presence of raised physical structures composed of dense material. A follow-up dive conducted by a separate team from the University of Tasmania confirmed the physical reality of the features visible in the sonar data. The divers described low walls on the seabed, heavily colonised by marine incrustation, including sponge, coral, and calcareous growth accumulated over an extended period, reaching heights of between 30 and 60 centimetres above the surrounding sediment surface. The walls followed the linear patterns the sonar had identified. They maintained consistent height and construction over their documented length. No naturally occurring geological process applicable to that specific location has been proposed that could produce parallel stone walls of consistent elevation and orientation. Direct dating of the structures themselves has proved technically difficult. The thickness of the marine incrustation makes surface sampling impractical for standard dating methods. Sediment cores, taken from immediately beside the base of the structures, returned optically stimulated luminescence dates of between 8,000 and 12,000 years before the present, a window entirely consistent with the period during which that area of the King Island seabed would have been above water, exposed to the atmosphere, and potentially inhabited by the coastal populations living on the now drowned Bass Strait Plain. A formal excavation proposal for the King Island seabed site has not been approved. Dedicated funding for systematic investigation has not been allocated. The site remains as it was found, sitting under 22 metres of Bass Strait water, encrusted, undisturbed, and waiting. What the divers found off King Island may represent the most significant submerged archaeological site ever identified in Australian waters. Or it may be an unusual geological formation that resembles intentional construction more closely than it actually is. The answer is sitting on the floor of Bass Strait, and no one has gone back down to look for it properly. 6 discoveries. 6 bodies of evidence that do not align with the version of what happened in Tasmania before European ships arrived in these waters. Kutikina and Warreen Caves push the confirmed date of human occupation back 30,000 years further than the prevailing model expected, and revealed cognitive behaviour far more sophisticated than that model allowed. The drowned landscapes of the Bass Strait Shelf suggest an entire inhabited world was consumed by rising seas and has been sitting under 40 metres of cold water for 10,000 years. The Derwent Valley artefacts raise the possibility of advanced lithic technology at a sediment depth the migration timeline cannot explain. The genetic data points toward a population divergence date decades older than the accepted model, and the stone structures off King Island rest on the floor of Bass Strait, undated, unexcavated, and largely absent from the public conversation. None of these findings have been fabricated. All of them are documented in published research, in university survey reports, in museum accession records. Several have been peer-reviewed and cited by working researchers. What is remarkable is not that the evidence exists, but that the conversation around it remains so measured, so slow, and in several cases, so deliberately quiet. The pattern is consistent across all 6 discoveries. A find is made, a paper is published, a debate begins, and then, without resolution, the discussion fades. The site goes uninvestigated, the question goes unanswered, and the next generation of researchers inherits the same silence. Tasmania has always been described as isolated, peripheral, a footnote at the bottom edge of the map. But the evidence beneath it tells a different story entirely. It describes a place that was central to human movement across the ancient southern world, long before any written record began. A place where the depth of history reaches further down than the current framework has been willing to excavate. The question is not whether these discoveries matter. They do. Every one of them does. The real question worth asking is why it has taken this long to treat them as though they genuinely do.